First and foremost, hello, my Human Form and Function class. Welcome to my documentary all about physicians-assisted suicide. What is physicians-assisted suicide? So, PA suicide is when a terminally ill patient decides to go to their doctor about end-of-life care. They often call this death with dignity because physicians-assisted suicide could be a misleading name that could kind of give the whole concept a negative feeling. So as of April 5th, 2018, California, Colorado, Washington, D.C., Oregon, Vermont, Montana, and Washington are the 7 states that allow PA suicide. And as of January 1st, yesterday, Hawaii just finally joined us. So this procedure tends to take place in the patient's home where there will be at least one healthcare worker present, and they take one of 2 drugs. So one of the 2 drugs that are commonly used is called Seconal, and it costs about $125 for a lethal dose of this drug, which is about 10 grams. It comes in the form of 100 individual capsules, and you must break them apart to produce about 3 tablespoons of powder, which generally is mixed in with a drink or pudding, so it kind of covers up the bitter taste. After taking this drug, the patient will slip into a coma about 5 minutes after, and the whole process will be finished in 30 minutes. The healthcare worker will be checking your pulse throughout this whole process. If you're in good shape or if you're morbidly obese, so both sides of the spectrum, this process could be delayed about 45 hours just because drugs work differently on different people's bodies. The second drug that is commonly used in physicians-assisted suicide is called Nembutal, and it comes in a liquid form already for you, but it can cost more than $1,000 for a lethal dose, and insurance companies don't usually cover these things because it's not a necessity, and there's just a lot of ethical issues around physicians-assisted suicide. So before we jump into this next part, it's important to note that euthanasia is when a physician administers the drug to the patient themselves. So whether it be through injection or ingestion or anything like that, that's what euthanasia is. Has been pinned with this whole thing, and his name is Jack Kevorkian, and he was an American pathologist and euthanasia proponent. So basically, he was saying that he was talking for people, talking for them, that terminal ill patients had the right to die via physicians-assisted suicide. He claimed to have assisted at least 130 patients to end their lives. The Oregon Death with Dignity Act passed in 1994 and became the first law in American history permitting physicians-assisted suicide. The 5th century BC to the 1st century BC, where ancient Greeks and Romans tended to support euthanasia. So in the 17th century, common law tradition prohibited suicide and assisted suicide in the American colonies, which was a big change from back when the Greeks and Romans were doing it. In the 1870s, Samuel Williams began to publicly advocate for using morphine and other drugs for euthanasia. In 1915, Dr. Heislin allowed a deformed baby boy to die rather than giving him possible life-saving surgery. And this kind of fits into this whole thing because physicians-assisted suicide also sometimes is seen as removing a feeding tube or ending respiratory care or things like that. It doesn't necessarily have to be lethal injection. It could be just end of care. So in the 1930s, more public support for euthanasia came during the Great Depression because people were depressed and there were a lot of sick kids and sick adults and people that didn't want/couldn't take care of themselves. In 1972, the U.S. held the first national hearings on euthanasia. June 4th, 1990, Jack Kevorkian participated in his first assisted suicide. In 1998, Jack Kevorkian assisted a suicide on national television through lethal injection. And then in 1999, Jack Kevorkian was convicted of murder. First, 2007, Jack Kevorkian was released on parole. December 5th, 2008, the state of Montana legalized physicians-assisted suicide. On June 3rd, 2011, Jack Kevorkian died at age 83. On June 7th, 2016, physicians-assisted suicide became legal in Canada. So a lot of the things that I saw with this, like the pros and cons, were a lot of people said that people should get to choose what they want to do with their own body. And an argument against that was that you're passing your suffering on to others, which is basically giving you a loophole, is what I saw a lot of. But then someone on the pro side said that the Hippocratic Oath says to cure or help. But the Hippocratic Oath also says that doctors can't harm the patient. So there's two sides of the story. People say that physicians-assisted suicide is a way for doctors to control us, and physicians can refuse this kind of help, but others say that they're obligated. People say that PA suicide saves money for families that don't have money to sit and pay for their loved one in the hospital, and there's less family stress. So I believe that there are a lot of obvious ethical concerns around PA suicide. Many people believe that it's murder, and a lot of it has to do with religion or just fate in general. Some people believe that we shouldn't mess with fate. I asked the question to some of my friends, do you think physicians-assisted suicide should be legal, and why?
My answer is yes. At some point with whatever illness, there is no more quality of life. And I have seen that in family members and members of my community where they have come to the end of their life, respectively, where there is no more quality of life, there is no more hope for curing or alleviating the symptoms of whatever they are battling, and since there is no quality of life, they don't enjoy being alive anymore.
I think that it should be legal because if I personally was suffering really bad, I would definitely want to die.
I believe that physicians-assisted suicide should be legal, or at least not punishable to the physician in any sort of way, if the patient has made it very clear that they do not want to live, or would rather find another way out to the disease, like death, and have to deal with it, because it is ultimately the patient's life if they want to die, and use the information that the physician has given them to take their own life.
I think that physician-assisted suicide should be allowed in some cases. A lot of people are hurting really bad, stage 5 cancer. Those people aren't living. It's not life. And if they feel like they want to move on in that sense, I feel like they should have the right to be allowed to medically be put under instead of doing something to harm themselves, like cutting their wrists or overdosing. So it should be in a safer way.
I feel like assisted suicide should only be when the person is like older, because when they're older, sometimes you don't want to suffer no more when you're like 80, so you just want to die. I can see that. But when you're like 20, 16, you have your whole life ahead of you. Knowing like you should want them to be more. You should want them to fulfill their life, not just throw it all away. So I feel like assisted suicide should help when you're older, and when you're younger, find different solutions because something can't help.
I think that if a physician helps someone kill themselves, then it should not be legal because they are helping someone murder a human being, so they should be punished.
I do believe physicians-assisted suicide should be legal because these doctors and surgeons take an oath to do no harm, and sometimes the end of a life is less harmful than continuing to live it. And as far as the morality of it, we allow DNRs and other extensive measures, so it's really no different.